what was the general attitude and mood of the head coach at Florida State since you were over in Pensacola to document his speech to the boosters?
Yeah, that was stop number 2 on the spring booster tour. Mike Norvell was in Orlando on Saturday. Then he was in Pensacola on Monday night. And yeah, man, I think he's found the right tone. I think, we talked about that last week. I know you've been talking about it on the wonderfully popular,
wildly
popular.
Yeah,
I knew it was a W. Jeff Cameron show that, we wondered what kind of balance he would strike between, sort of apologizing for what happened last year, maybe explaining what happened last year, and then also looking forward. I think I don't know, hear your guys' thoughts, but I think it's probably the right message that, clearly things slipped. I think that's an understatement, but, he's kind of touched on it, they've changed or maybe gone back to how they evaluate players. They're going to be more demanding. There's a more of an energy in the practices. That was one thing I asked him about last night that he talked about that I'll write about on the site at Warchant is the nice thing about a new coaching staff coming in, and this is what this feels like, even though Mike Norvell stayed and a couple assistants stayed, the nice thing for players on the team is it is a fresh start for a lot of them. And so there are guys on this depth chart on offense and defense who maybe didn't click with Adam Fuller. And I can think of some guys that, maybe didn't click with Adam Fuller or maybe Alex Atkins had them buried on the offensive line depth chart and they just couldn't, impress him or, you have history with these people. Mm-hmm. And when you have a new coaching staff, everybody gets a fresh start. And I think he said, you can sense that new energy. And again, that's not going to be what carries you through games in August and September and October, but it is, a positive thing for right now, I guess.
Did he take any questions from the crowd?
You know what? Honestly, I kind of bailed before he finished.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Man, Corey,
it's a long drive back to
Pensacola. Man, that's tough.
I knew the answer already. That was like a lawyer. I knew the answer. I was just wanting to see if he'd lie about it. My bad. Sorry, I didn't know that.
I think I think it was prepared question. I think you had to submit questions in advance.
You did,
and they were
right?
going to vet them.
Yeah. I will say this. I think they have a chance in spring. Like if you want to send a message and you want to see guys fight for the right to be on the field and you want to see a better attitude from veteran players who maybe kind of packed it in last year and you want to see some of the young players challenge people on the depth chart, you got a chance in spring to go to war. Because honestly, like you'll deal with the bumps and bruises of that. Obviously, you never want to lose anybody, but it's football and you can't live life like that. You got to go out there and compete. If you're trying to establish more physicality in practice, if you're trying to really foster that kind of competition, and spring could get fun for us out there watching practice. I mean, you got a new coach implementing a new scheme, guys fighting for positions. You got an offense that's predicated on the run, which by definition means you're going to be extremely physical. You got a chance to really create the kind of toughness and intensity that you're going to want to see that you didn't see last year in this spring. It could be infinitely fascinating for us to watch this, to see how they change practices and make them compete and find, quote unquote, as he's been talking about, Ira, that edge. Well, that's how you would do it.
Yeah, what do you think about the edge? And because I read those comments, the ones from Saturday specifically. I guess did he say it at the boosters thing or the coaches thing or both?
Everywhere. He
talked about the edge.
Yeah, he talked about it when he spoke. So that day, Saturday, and Matt was down there in Orlando. He talked at a Nike coaches clinic. The whole staff did. FSU staff was invited to talk. He talked about it there. Then when he met with the media, he talked about it. And they asked him follow-up questions because he had talked about it to the coaches, and then he talked about it at the booster event as well.
Because I get it, and he's not wrong. They did not play with any urgency or physicality at all last year. But it's like, why did it take 2 and 10 to look for the edge? Like what was lost the year before? Like what's different this time around? Because he said a lot of good things about these kids that came in last year too, about the transfers and they're the right kind of fit. What's different about this crew? Like what did Mike Norvell specifically get wrong about some of those kids he brought in? Because not only the kids he brought in, that's not even fair. The players that were still on the team, so many of them didn't play with any sort of edge.
To me, I thought, especially if you go back to listen to his comments, what he said last year, and people will say, oh, he hyped up the team last year. He did. He 100% did. But the way he did it, he talked about their speed numbers and the weight they moved in the weight room. But he never really talked about the fierce competitors or, and that's the difference to me, I think, right? Like you'll see big dudes get into a fight and get their butt kicked because they're not, and by smaller dudes who are just badasses. And so sometimes it's just, are you going to fight? Are you going to compete? Or are you just a weight room warrior? And I think there was some of that, man. And so I think that's a evaluation thing. And then it's also a practice culture thing. And man, one of the comments that Tony White made that Matt had up on the website from when Tony White talked to the coaches at the coaches clinic.
Yeah.
He said, he's like, man, our goal is to, when people put on the film and they watch us play defense and they're putting their practice plan together, that they realize, you know what? We need to do a little less 7-on-7 this week. We need to do a little bit more inside run drill because we're not going to be able to run the ball if we don't bring it because those guys are going to bring it. Well, to Jeff's point, you can't get that way without practicing that way. So that is going to be fascinating because that's not really how FSU's been practicing.
I'm predicting, and I could be way off base, but I just listening to Tony White's comments, knowing what the team was a year ago, hearing Mike Norvell talk about finding this edge and being tougher, knowing what the basis for Gus Malzahn's offense is, knowing the way Tony White played as a player and what he's going to require of guys, it suggests to me that we're going to have a very, very different looking camp. And I would think it's going to be a very physical camp. And I don't think they should shy away from that. I think you can throw caution to the wind there, man. It was such an unmitigated disaster a year ago that you want to fly in the face of that with the opposite, right? You just want to do something that isn't at all like what we saw a year ago. You can have underlying principles that will always guide Mike Norvell and in what he wants to be as a coach and all of that. But I think you can't be tough without being tough. It's not something you can talk about. You have to do it. You have to live it. That means they're going to hit. That means they're going to effing tackle like a lot. I would think that has to happen.
It has to, right? It has to. Like you can't well, because number one, not just because you're trying to change a mindset, it's because you were horrible at that stuff last year. You couldn't block our tackle, and you have new coaches on both sides of the ball. They got to figure out what they have. Like, yeah, anybody can look great. Well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of people can look great in a weight room or a tour of duty. I know that's very hard stuff that they do, but it's a whole different deal when you're in pads and you're actually playing football, and you got to know who you got.